The cameras were already rolling long before Hailey Bieber stepped into the courtroom, but no one, not the reporters, not the spectators, not even Diddy's legal team, could have predicted what would happen inside those four walls today. It wasn't just another celebrity trial. It wasn't just another headline. This was history unfolding in real time. Outside the federal courthouse, chaos had already erupted. Helicopters hovered above, their constant buzzing mixing with the deafening roars of hundreds of fans, protesters, and journalists desperate to catch a glimpse of the woman who was about to shatter everything we thought we knew about Diddy. One testimony at a time, and then it happened. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and Hailey Bieber walked in. Dressed in an understated black suit, her usually polished, camera-ready smile was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes were swollen, and even from the back of the room, you could see she hadn't slept in days. She clutched a crumpled tissue in her right hand, gripping it like a lifeline. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. You could almost hear the silence, broken only by the frantic scratching of reporters' pens and the occasional click of cameras trying to capture her every move. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and sat down in the witness box. The judge leaned forward slightly, peering at her through thick glasses, while Diddy's attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. They knew, everyone knew, that what she was about to say could change everything. Then came the moment no one was prepared for. The prosecutor, a tall woman with a sharp voice that cut through the silence, stepped forward. "Mrs. Bieber," she began slowly, "can you tell the court, in your own words, what happened that night?" Hailey hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. The room seemed to shrink around her. You could see her throat tightening, her breathing uneven, and then her voice cracked. It's not easy to talk about," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. I kept this inside for so long because I was terrified. But I can't stay silent anymore." The first tear slipped down her cheek, and at that moment, the entire courtroom shifted. People leaned forward in their seats. The reporters' pens froze mid-sentence, and even Diddy himself, normally composed and unreadable, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Hailey took another shaky breath, her fingers digging into the wooden railing of the witness stand. Her eyes darted briefly toward Diddy, and for the first time since the trial began, there was fear in his expression too. "I was there," she continued softly. "I saw things I wish I could erase from my memory, things that haunt me every single night." Her words hung heavy in the air. Across the room, Justin Bieber sat quietly, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He hadn't spoken to reporters for days, refusing to give any statement. But now, watching his wife breaking apart on the stand, he lowered his head and closed his eyes, as if praying silently. The prosecutor gently handed her a glass of water, giving her a moment to collect herself. Hailey wiped her cheeks, steadied her voice, and continued. "It wasn't just one night," she said, her tone stronger now, though still laced with pain. "It wasn't just one bad decision. It was everything. The parties, the people, the threats, the way we were forced to stay quiet because of who he was, because of the power he had." She paused, taking another shaky breath before looking directly at the jury. "For years, people whispered, people suspected, but nobody wanted to come forward. I thought, maybe if I stayed quiet, it would all go away. But it didn't. It got worse. And I know I'm not the only one." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, and the judge had to bang the gavel to restore order. But Hailey wasn't finished. Her next words would send shockwaves across the country. "I was told to keep my mouth shut," she said firmly now, her voice trembling but determined. "I was told that if I ever spoke up, my life, my family's life, would never be the same." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. You could feel the ripple of disbelief, anger, and fear move like a wave through the crowd. Reporters were already typing furiously. their headlines practically writing themselves. Hailey Bieber. Breaks silence. Explosive testimony reveals Diddy's darkest secrets. Inside the defense table, Diddy's lead attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently into his client's ear. But Diddy didn't respond. He just stared at Hailey, jaw clenched, his usually controlled demeanor cracking under the weight of her words. Hailey's voice wavered as she continued. I kept quiet for so long because I thought nobody would believe me. I thought people would call me a liar, but I can't live with this anymore. Her tears returned, this time unstoppable, her trembling hands clutching the microphone as if holding on to the last thread of her composure. Suddenly, Justin reached out from the gallery, locking eyes with her. That silent exchange between husband and wife, raw, vulnerable, human, became the most unforgettable moment of the day. And then Hailey said the words that silenced even the loudest skeptics. He's not who you think he is. The weight of the statement was crushing. Every head in the courtroom turned toward Diddy. Some gasped, others whispered, but everyone, understood what had just been said. The prosecutor leaned in closer, her voice calm but urgent. Mrs. Bieber, for the record, are you saying you witnessed acts committed by Mr. Combs that the public doesn't know about? Hailey nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. Yes, I did. The silence was absolute. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even the buzz of a phone. And in that moment, the trial wasn't just about one man's reputation anymore. It was about power, secrets, and the price of staying silent. Outside the courthouse, the world had no idea what had just unfolded. But inside, history had already been rewritten. The courtroom seemed frozen in time after Hailey's last words. The silence was deafening, and yet you could almost hear the pounding of hundreds of hearts inside that room. Everyone, from the jurors to the journalists, from the attorneys to the spectators, was holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Diddy sat at the defense table, shoulders tense, fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. For years, he had been untouchable, a mogul, a kingmaker, a man whose influence reached far beyond music and entertainment. But right now, as Hailey's voice echoed through the chamber, all of that power seemed to be slipping away, one word at a time. The prosecutor leaned forward, her tone soft but deliberate. Mrs. Bieber, she began, when you say you witnessed things, can you explain to the jury what you mean? Hailey closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling deeply, trying to steady herself. When she opened them again, her gaze was firm, unblinking. It was one of those nights, she said slowly, her voice trembling but clear. The kind of night where you know you shouldn't be there. But you stay anyway, because you feel like you don't have a choice. She paused, letting the words settle before continuing. The music was loud, the lights were blinding. Everyone was drinking, laughing, pretending like nothing could touch them. But behind the closed doors, she hesitated, her breath hitching slightly. It was different. Behind those doors, the smiles faded, the laughter stopped, and that's when I saw who he really was. The jury leaned forward. Reporters exchanged quick glances, already typing out fragments of what would become tomorrow's explosive headlines. The prosecutor nodded gently, encouraging her to go on. Take your time, Mrs. Bieber. Tell the court what you saw. Hailey swallowed hard, gripping the microphone tighter. Her voice lowered, almost to a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in closer. I saw him, yelling at someone, threatening them, telling them that if they didn't do what he wanted, they'd regret it. Her breathing quickened, and tears welled up again as she continued. It wasn't just anger. It was control. It was fear. Everyone in that room knew. If you crossed him, your life could change forever. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A few people covered their mouths. One juror shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms as if bracing himself for what was coming next. Hailey hesitated again, her eyes darting briefly toward Justin, who sat motionless in the gallery, his face pale but steady. She drew strength from his silent support, taking another deep breath before going on. There were girls there, she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the memory. Young girls, too young, and they were scared. You could see it in their eyes. They wanted to leave, but they couldn't. Nobody could. The collective gasp that followed was louder this time. The defense attorney immediately jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor," he barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "This is speculation. She's making accusations without evidence." But the judge raised his hand calmly, motioning for him to sit back down. "Overruled," he said firmly. "Mrs. Bieber, please continue." Hailey wiped her cheeks and nodded faintly, her voice steadier now, though heavy with pain. "I didn't want to believe it," she admitted softly. "I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe I misunderstood. But deep down, I knew. I knew what I saw. And I knew what it meant." For the first time since the trial began, Diddy shifted forward in his seat, his composure cracking ever so slightly. He whispered something to his attorney, but his words were lost in the murmurs filling the room. The prosecutor leaned closer. "Hailey," she said gently, "did anyone ever warn you not to talk about this?" Hailey let out a shaky laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Warn me," she repeated, shaking her head slowly. "They didn't just warn me. They threatened me." Her words landed like thunderclaps. "Who threatened you?" The prosecutor asked softly, though everyone in the room already knew the answer. Hailey glanced toward the defense table, her eyes locking with Diddy's for the briefest, most chilling moment of the day. Then she looked back at the jury. "He did," she said simply. The crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, and whispers filled the room until the judge slammed his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. "Quiet! Quiet! Or I will clear the courtroom!" Hailey closed her eyes as the noise died down, her hands trembling but her voice unwavering. "He told me that if I ever spoke about what I saw, it wouldn't just ruin me. It would ruin Justin, my family, everyone I love." Justin leaned forward in his seat, his jaw tightening, his eyes glistening with restrained anger. He had been silent for so long, but now his entire body language screamed the pain and frustration he had carried for years. The prosecutor gave Hailey a moment to breathe, handing her another tissue before asking her next question carefully. "Mrs. Bieber, can you explain to the jury why you chose to come forward now?" Hailey hesitated, her lips trembling, then exhaled shakily. "Because I can't live with it anymore," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I can't keep pretending like none of this happened. And if I stay silent, it keeps happening to other people. I can't let that happen." This time, the silence wasn't just heavy, it was crushing. Even the reporters, normally relentless, desperate for every detail, stopped writing for a moment, caught in the gravity of her words. From the defense table, Diddy's attorney finally stood again, his voice rising with frustration. "Your Honor, the defense requests a recess. My client's rights are being trampled by unproven accusations and emotional manipulation in this courtroom." The judge rubbed his forehead, clearly weighing his options, before shaking his head firmly. "Denied," he said. "We will proceed." Hailey leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but steady now. "I stayed quiet because I was scared," she said, almost to herself. "But silence protects the wrong people. It lets them keep doing what they do, and I can't be a part of that anymore." Diddy finally spoke, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the silence. "You're lying." Gasps filled the room once again as all eyes darted toward the defense table. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering urgently, but Diddy ignored him, his gaze locked on Hailey, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. Hailey didn't flinch. She didn't look away. For the first time since she walked into the courtroom, there was fire behind her tears. "I wish I was," she said softly. "But you know I'm not." The tension was unbearable. Every person in that room knew this was no longer just a trial. It was a battle for truth, for justice, and for survival. Outside, crowds chanted and cameras flashed, but inside, the walls of this courtroom were closing in on one of the most powerful figures in the music industry, and the woman who had just shattered his world. The air inside the courtroom was suffocating. Every word, every breath, every movement felt heavier than before. Hailey sat silently now, her eyes red but unwavering, as the prosecutor slowly walked toward the evidence table. There was something different in her demeanor, a quiet confidence, the kind that said something big was coming. The prosecutor glanced at the jury, then turned back to Hailey. "Mrs. Bieber," she said gently, "you've told us about what you witnessed, but today the court will also hear something. You recorded that night. Can you confirm this?" Hailey froze for a moment, her lips parting slightly as the weight of those words settled over the room. After a brief pause, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I recorded part of it." The entire gallery erupted. Reporters typing frantically, spectators whispering in disbelief. Diddy's attorney shot to his feet immediately, slamming his hand against the table. "Objection, Your Honor," he barked. "This is outrageous. These so-called recordings are inadmissible. They're manipulated and—" "Sit down," the judge interrupted, his voice stern and commanding. "We will review the evidence before ruling. Proceed, counselor." The prosecutor gave a slight nod, then turned to the technician waiting nearby. "Play Exhibit 14, she said, and then the room went silent as the speakers came alive. At first, there was just muffled noise, laughter, clinking glasses, the thrum of music vibrating through the background. But then, a voice. Deep, commanding, unmistakable. "You don't get to walk away from me!" Diddy's voice thundered through the speakers, cold and sharp as a blade. "You do what I tell you, or you disappear. Do you understand?" Gasps filled the room like a sudden storm. Several jurors sat back in shock, while others leaned forward, frozen in place. Hailey stared down at her hands, her body trembling. As the recording continued, a second voice, shaky and pleading, responded, "Please, I just want to go home." "No." Diddy's voice snapped back instantly, dripping with menace. "You're not going anywhere until I say so." The sound of crying could be heard faintly in the background. The defense attorney shot up again, shouting, "This is taken out of context. My client is being set up. We demand an immediate mistrial." But the judge wasn't moved. "Sit down, counselor," he ordered firmly. "The jury will decide what this means." For the first time, Diddy's mask of control was cracking. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. He whispered something to his attorney, but the cameras caught every flicker of unease on his face. The prosecutor walked toward the jury, her voice steady but measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning," she said, pausing for effect. "What you just heard is not an isolated incident. There are more recordings, there are witnesses, and there is a pattern." Hailey inhaled deeply, bracing herself as the prosecutor turned back to her. "Mrs. Bieber, can you explain why you made this recording?" She nodded faintly, wiping away another tear. "Because I was scared," she admitted softly. "I thought, if something happened to me, at least there would be proof. At least someone would know the truth." Her voice cracked, and Justin, seated a few rows behind her, lowered his head into his hands. He had tried for so long to protect her, to keep her out of the spotlight's darkest shadows, but now there was no hiding. The prosecutor nodded solemnly, then addressed the court again. "We have additional testimony from someone who was there that night, someone who witnessed the same events." Another wave of murmurs surged through the room. Diddy's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as the courtroom doors opened, and a young woman stepped inside. The gallery collectively gasped. She was petite, no older than 20, her hands clasped tightly together as she walked nervously to the witness stand. She avoided eye contact with everyone, her gaze fixed on the floor until she finally sat down. The prosecutor approached her carefully. "State your name for the record, please." The girl's voice was barely audible. Sophia Reyes. "And Sophia," the prosecutor continued gently, "can you tell the court why you're here today?" Sophia's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the witness box. "Because I was there," she whispered. Every eye in the courtroom locked on her. "I saw what happened," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I saw what he did to those girls, and I thought nobody would believe me. But when I heard Hailey was coming forward, I knew I had to speak." Diddy's attorney shot up again, voice shaking now with anger. "Your Honor, this is a circus. These so-called witnesses are unreliable, coached, and biased." But before the judge could respond, Sophia raised her voice suddenly, stronger this time. "I'm not lying." The room fell silent again. The prosecutor placed a reassuring hand on the witness stand. "Sophia," she said softly, "do you feel safe right now?" Sophia hesitated before answering, her eyes flicking briefly toward Diddy. "Not really," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Because I know what he's capable of. We all do." Her words landed like a punch to the gut. Diddy leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable now, but his silence said more than any outburst ever could. For the first time, the power balance in that courtroom shifted. The judge cleared his throat, his tone grave. "This court will recess for 1 hour, he announced, slamming his gavel. "When we return, the prosecution will present its next round of evidence." Reporters bolted for the exits, cameras flashing, phones buzzing with breaking news alerts. Hailey sat frozen in her chair, her breathing shallow, her hands clenched tightly together. She knew this was far from over. If anything, the real storm was just beginning. Outside, crowds swarmed the courthouse steps, chanting, debating, and speculating wildly. Social media exploded, hashtags trending worldwide within minutes. Talk Diddy trial, Chark Hailey speaks, Chark justice for Sophia. Inside, behind closed doors, Diddy stared out the small window of the defense room, his jaw set, his mind racing. For the first time in decades, the empire he built on silence, loyalty, and fear was starting to crumble. The hour-long recess came and went, but when the court reconvened, the atmosphere was different, heavier. Everyone sensed it, like the calm before a violent storm. Reporters whispered in the back rows, phones in hand, already predicting that this session would change everything. Hailey sat at the witness stand, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of a tissue. Justin was still behind her, his hands clasped, jaw tight, eyes locked on Diddy. Across the room, Diddy leaned back in his chair, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. But his silence screamed louder than any outburst could. The judge banged his gavel once. "Court is back in session. Prosecution, you may proceed." The prosecutor stood slowly, adjusting her blazer before stepping toward the center of the courtroom. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. "Your Honor, members of the jury, what you're about to hear next will shed light on years of secrets, intimidation, and manipulation." She glanced briefly at Hailey before continuing. "We have a new witness, someone from inside Mr. Combs's inner circle." The gallery collectively gasped. Diddy's head snapped up instantly, his jaw tightening as the double doors opened once again. A tall man in his late 40s walked in, his shoulders squared but his expression tense. He wore a dark suit and sunglasses, but the moment he stepped forward, the whispers began. Everyone recognized him. This wasn't just any witness. This was Andre Coleman, Diddy's former head of security. Diddy's attorney shot up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This witness was not disclosed to the defense." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Overruled. The prosecution may proceed." Andre stepped onto the stand, removing his sunglasses slowly. His eyes scanned the courtroom before finally settling on Diddy. For a moment, it looked like the two men were silently communicating. Decades of loyalty clashing with the weight of truth. The prosecutor approached him carefully. "Mr. Coleman, can you please state your occupation during the years 2015 through 2022? Andre cleared his throat, his deep voice steady. "I was Mr. Combs's chief of security." "And during those years," she continued, "were you present at private events, parties, and closed-door meetings?" "Yes," he answered simply. "And did you witness incidents involving threats, intimidation, or coercion?" Andre hesitated, just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of his next words. "Yes," he said finally. "I did." Gasps filled the gallery once again. The prosecutor stepped closer. "Mr. Coleman, can you describe one of those nights for the jury?" Andre's jaw tightened, his voice deep and deliberate as he spoke. "It was December 3rd, 2019. One of the private parties. I was stationed near the VIP area, and I saw him," he nodded toward Diddy, "talking to 3 girls. They were young, frightened. They kept asking to leave." Hailey swallowed hard, her face pale as she listened. Her own memories resurfacing, Andre continued, his voice lower now, forcing the jury to lean in. "He told them they couldn't leave, that if they walked out, their lives would change in ways they wouldn't like. I'd heard that tone before. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat." Diddy's attorney leapt to his feet. Again. "Speculation," he shouted. "This is nothing but a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge." Andre didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead and said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I couldn't sleep anymore. Because I know what I saw. And because people need to know the truth." The silence after his words was deafening. The prosecutor gave him a moment before asking, "Mr. Coleman, were you ever threatened yourself?" Andre nodded slowly. "Yes," he said quietly. "The first time I questioned him about what I was seeing, he pulled me into his office and told me, 'You work for me. You breathe because of me. Don't forget that.'" The jury shifted uneasily, several exchanging troubled glances. The prosecutor walked to the evidence table, lifting a small black flash drive. "Mr. Coleman, you provided us with certain files, correct?" Andre nodded. "Yes, audio recordings, surveillance clips, things I kept for my own protection." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we move to admit Exhibit 22 into evidence." Diddy's attorney shouted in protest, but this time the judge slammed his gavel. "Enough! Overruled! Play the recording!" The speakers crackled once again, filling the courtroom with grainy audio. At first it was faint, muffled voices, laughter, clinking glasses. Then, crystal clear, Diddy's voice emerged. "Don't test me. I own you. You walk out of here, you don't walk anywhere ever again." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Hailey shut her eyes, tears silently falling, while Justin clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. The courtroom was stunned into silence, until the prosecutor stepped forward again. "Mr. Coleman," she asked, "in your years, working for Mr. Combs, did you witness more than one incident like this?" Andre nodded gravely. "Too many," he said softly, "and every time I told myself it wasn't my place, that it was just business. But watching good people suffer, watching them break, I can't carry that anymore." Reporters in the gallery were typing furiously, headlines practically writing themselves. Ex-security chief turns on Diddy. Hailey Bieber's testimony gains massive backing. Explosive evidence threatens to collapse Diddy's empire. The prosecutor took a step back, letting the weight of Andre's testimony linger in the air before she finally said, "No further questions, Your Honor." Diddy's attorney rose for cross-examination, his voice sharp, almost desperate. "Mr. Coleman, isn't it true that you were fired from your position? That you have every reason to lie in order to damage my client's reputation?" Andre met his glare without hesitation. "I wasn't fired," he said firmly. "I quit, because I couldn't stand watching what was happening anymore." The gallery erupted once again, the tension boiling over until the judge banged his gavel furiously, demanding silence. Hailey exhaled shakily, gripping the edges of the witness stand, knowing deep down that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Diddy sat motionless now, but his clenched jaw and piercing stare made one thing clear. He wasn't going down without a fight. The courtroom was silent when the judge returned, his robe flowing behind him like a shadow of authority. The entire world was watching. Live streams were breaking records, hashtags dominated social media, and outside the courthouse, thousands of people stood shoulder to shoulder, chanting for justice. Inside, Hailey gripped the edges of the witness stand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Justin sat behind her, leaning forward, his hands clasped as if in silent prayer. Across the room, Diddy's expression was unreadable, cold, calculating, but underneath the facade, his jaw twitched with barely contained rage. The prosecutor rose from her seat, walking slowly to the center of the courtroom, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm but heavy with anticipation. "The prosecution would like to introduce one final piece of evidence. Exhibit 29. The defense attorney immediately shot up. "Your Honor, we object. The prosecution has already played its strongest recordings. This is a last-minute ambush." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Overruled. Proceed." The prosecutor nodded and turned to the technician, signaling for the playback. A hush swept through the courtroom as the lights dimmed slightly and the speakers came alive one last time. It wasn't just audio this time. It was video. Grainy, shaky footage filled the screen. A hidden camera, its angle low and discreet, captured a private VIP room. Diddy sat on a couch, leaning forward, his voice sharp, commanding, and terrifyingly calm. "You think you can walk? Away from me," he said, pointing at someone off camera. "You think anyone leaves without my permission? I built this world. I decide who stays in it." Suddenly, a woman's voice cracked through the recording. "Please, just let us leave." "We didn't agree to this." Diddy slammed his glass down so hard it shattered, the sound reverberating through the speakers and sending chills through the room. The jury froze. Hailey's hands trembled uncontrollably as she covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. Justin reached forward instinctively, his fingertips grazing her shoulder, silently grounding her. And then, a voice no one expected came through the video. Andre Coleman, the former security chief who had just testified, appeared in the frame, standing awkwardly in the corner of the room. His voice was barely audible, but chillingly clear. "Sean, maybe you should let them go." Diddy turned to him slowly, his face darkening like a storm. "You open your mouth one more time, Andre," he said, his voice low and venomous, "and I'll bury you with them." The jury audibly gasped. Reporters frantically typed as cameras clicked in rapid bursts. The courtroom descended into chaos until the judge slammed his gavel repeatedly, his voice booming, "Order! Order in this court!" Diddy's attorney buried, his face in his hands, whispering urgently to his client. But Diddy just sat there, unmoving, his glare fixed straight ahead. The prosecutor turned to the jury, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've now seen it, you've heard it, the threats, the fear, the control. For years, power has shielded Mr. Combs from accountability. Today, that ends." Hailey's tears flowed freely now, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to stay composed. Her testimony had brought the world here, to this moment, but the weight of reliving it all was crushing her. Then, unexpectedly, Diddy rose from his seat. The entire room stiffened. He straightened his jacket, walked calmly to the defense table, and placed both hands on it, leaning forward. His voice, deep and controlled, cut through the silence. "You all want a villain?" he said slowly, looking directly at the jury. "Fine. Make me one. But don't think for a second this ends here." The prosecutor froze. The defense attorney tried to pull him back, whispering frantically, but Diddy shoved his hand away. "This isn't justice," Diddy said coldly. "This is theater, and you're all just playing your roles." Gasps rippled through the gallery as he sat back down, crossing his arms. The judge adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable, before addressing the jury. "You've now seen and heard all the evidence," he said firmly. "The time has come for deliberation." The jury filed out, the room buzzing with tension. Minutes felt like hours. Reporters refreshed their feeds. Spectators prayed. Hailey stared blankly at the table, clutching Justin's hand for strength, while Diddy sat motionless, his gaze locked on the floor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jury returned. Everyone rose as the foreperson handed a folded paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge opened it, scanned the words silently, then cleared his throat. "In the matter of Sean Combs," the courtroom went silent. "We, the jury, find the defendant." A heartbeat passed. "Guilty on all counts." The room exploded. Gasps, cries, cheers from the gallery. Reporters bolted for the doors, their phones lighting up with breaking news alerts. Social media erupted instantly. Hashtags like "Diddy guilty," "Hailey wins," and "Justice served" flooded every platform. Hailey buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as Justin wrapped his arms around her tightly, whispering something only she could hear. Andre closed his eyes, finally releasing a breath he'd been holding for years. Diddy, meanwhile, remained perfectly still, his face expressionless, but his eyes, cold, piercing, locked on Hailey one last time. The bailiff approached him, cautiously. "Mr. Combs, please stand." Diddy rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. His jaw clenched so hard a vein bulged in his neck. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the cameras flashed like lightning, immortalizing the fall of one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. The judge banged his gavel for the final time. Court is adjourned. Hailey walked out of the courtroom hand in hand with Justin, tears still streaking her face but her expression steady. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a survivor. And now, the world finally knew the truth. Outside, the courthouse erupted into chaos, reporters swarming, fans cheering, critics screaming, but Hailey didn't hear any of it. For the first time in years, she felt free. And though the verdict had been delivered, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of a much bigger story. If you were shocked by what happened in court today, make sure you don't miss a single update. Hit that like button to show your support, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to know when we reveal the next shocking chapter in this story. Comment below with your thoughts. What do you think about Diddy's fall from power and Hailey's courageous testimony? Join the conversation and be part of a community that uncovers the truth behind the headlines.